What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q from Retro Q Gaming, back at it as always. I here with episode 32 of our Quack Experimental Podcast after a week off because, well, absolutely nothing happened last week at all. I believe at the time of planned recording, or usual recording anyway, I had one single topic to talk about. That was it. One single topic. And then I got one later that night, so I was up to two, and I just said, nope. It's just not happening. So here we are with, I can't even call it a double week, because while we do have all the stuff that happened this week, as well as the two topics that happened last week, actually I think I made one of them into a video during the week, but overall, it's not a double stuffed rib for her pleasure episode, unfortunately, but we got some stuff to talk about. But before we go any further, and before we start our first proper topic, I do want to mention one thing. It's a little bit of a celebration. That's right, YouTube, Susan, whoever it is you wanna refer to them as, they have caved to my massive political pressure. My big, long, strong, throbbing pressure. Because naturally, I'm a man that carries much importance. And a certain je ne sais quoi, if you will. But yes, due to my immense pressure that I just exude at every possible orifice and every possible turn, YouTube have clarified that on December 10th, when the new terms of service come into play, stuff that they deem not financially viable does not mean shutting channels down that don't make them enough money. They have clarified that they said that has nothing to do with it. They will not be shutting down or disabling channels or anything like that, or restricting ability to upload or ability to live stream or whatever for people like myself who don't monetize any of their videos, or for people who do monetize their videos just don't make them enough money. No. They've clarified that it means it's just a kind of a catch-all, if you will, for down the line if they decide to retire new features, or, well, retire features from YouTube, just in general, basically, in case it's no longer commercially viable. Don't ask me what these would be. Maybe they're going to disable comment sections. Maybe they're going to disable... Fuck, I don't even know at this point. But the point is that no. Me, myself, many of you guys out there, many of you, probably you guys who just seem to flock to the terms of service worries video that I had, obviously welcome, and I'm sure many of you had the same things, same issues and the same worries based on the comments anyway about your own channels. So luckily we are here to stay, we're still there, so that's a good one at least anyway. So we'll go on to our first little topic anyway. And our first one is just a little quick tidbit. I used the footage for this one during a small video earlier this week. And it's more of a little bit of a passion project. Not my own passion project because, well, I'm wildly untalented when it comes to game creation. I can't program, I have no art skills, and, well, that's basically it, isn't it? So we have Silent Hill. Now, Silent Hill is obviously one of the greatest games of all time. It's a fantastic, phenomenal psychological horror game. Granted, Silent Hill 2 is an absolute masterpiece in the genre, but Silent Hill 1 is still a great game, and thankfully, it founded the series. Unfortunately, the series has kind of nosedived the last couple of years, last couple of games, and now it's basically dead. But anyway, there is a first-person remake of Silent Hill 1. Now, before you get any thoughts there and all as well, it's only of the opening starting section. It's of the intro to the game as well as the quick little starting section of the game anyway. It's created by someone called Zero Trace Operative. If you go back a couple of days and just check out some maybe 3 or 4 minute videos I made earlier this week, you'll find out exactly which one it is. And you can see the entirety of the project all in that video. It is very, very short, but it's kind of cool in that regard. As someone who loves, obviously, retro games, but specifically Silent Hill, it was nice to see it get some love from basically anyone. Someone as talented, obviously, as Zero Trace Operative. Now, what they did is, instead of ripping direct assets from the game, he actually traced the assets extracted, rather than just completely rip them and reuse the original, because obviously that would count as using the... what do they call it? Using the copyrighted properties and the trademark, the intellectual properties, blah, blah, blah. So that could get you destroyed or shut down or whatever, especially because, well, Konami in current year when it comes to anything about their games that aren't Pro Evolution. But anyway, like I said, it is a very small little project. It will last you maybe 4 or 5 minutes to download, or 4 or 5 minutes to play, including if you watch the entire proper intro. But it's nice to get a quick pang of nostalgia. It still has the opening splash screens from the PlayStation era. It has the old Konami logo. It has a couple of other companies' logos that are involved with it too. And it even has counter to Resident Evil, basically. You might remember Resident Evil has like, this game contains scenes of explicit violence and gore. Yeah, the Silent Hill one would always be something along the lines of contains situations and scenes of grossly disturbing imagery, or something along those lines. It's nice to get hit by that stuff as well, especially when you haven't played it in so long. The project is complete. There will be no more progress made on it. He's not going to continue on through the game. He's not going to try and make the whole game or whatever it is. But I highly recommend you check it out. If you have a quick Google of it, you can find it anywhere easy. I believe it's from... you can download it for free, obviously, from, I think, is it itch.io or something like that. I clicked the link and I got it from there. I can't really remember where it was. It's like 5 or 6 or 700 MB, so it takes you 2 seconds to download. And quick install, 5 minutes to play. If you've played Silent Hill before in the past, especially if you really like it and really love it, this will bring a special little flicker of nostalgic emotion to your cold, dead husk of a heart. Or at least it did for me, anyway. But on to our next one. We have some really, really weird stuff. And this one will kind of link into another topic that we'll talk about a little bit down the line. Now, this new one is Need for Speed. Now, you're probably wondering, Q, what are you doing talking about Need for Speed at this point? You don't play EA games, you don't buy EA games, and you don't even like racing games. In fact, probably the only racing games I've played in the last 2 decades have been Mario Kart, and I wouldn't even really call them racing games. Actually, that's not true. I did play a Need for Speed game. Was it Most Wanted? Back at the start of the 360 era, back when there was almost nothing to play, and a friend of mine just let me borrow it. But anyway, back to the point. Confusing and absolutely destroying everyone's mental state, the new Need for Speed game, which I do want to remind everyone is created by EA, that's right, Electronic Arts. Remember loot boxes and Project $10 and whatnot, everybody? Well, this Need for Speed game has no microtransactions whatsoever. I know. Just take a second, let that sink in. No microtransactions at all in an EA game. I know, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not the point and the purpose of this topic. The one specific reason of why we're making this one is more so, again, back to review outlets, media outlets, whatever you want to call them. Remember how I will always vehemently, adamantly defend people never, ever, ever listening to them in any way, shape, or form? Well, one of the worst websites out there, aka Polygon, I'm sorry, but yeah, they're at it again when it comes to Need for Speed, and it's no microtransactions. They claim that this is a bad thing. Okay, let me say that. Remember when me, all these other YouTubers, all these other gamers, all these other everything, not all the other YouTubers, many of them are actually kind of, bad opinions, but let me point it out again. Remember when we say that you don't believe these, and these people that work for these and they write these reviews and whatnot, they're not your friends. They're not pro-consumer. In fact, they are pro-corporation and anti-consumer. This is a perfect example of this. They're saying that no microtransactions in a Need for Speed game is a bad thing. Now, they're putting it down to, that means EA have no faith in this game. They're not really trying. They're just putting it out there. They could potentially use this if it doesn't sell to cancel the series and whatnot. Some of which could be true. Obviously, if a game series stops selling, that they will just shelve it indefinitely. Remember Medal of Honor, anybody? But yeah, as far as having no faith in the game because they put no microtransactions in it, no. That's not the case whatsoever. You may remember that probably some of the highest profile loot box and microtransaction shenanigans and chicanery of 2018 was EA with Star Wars Battlefield 2. What are these people at? Do Do they think before they type? Well, obviously they don't, because their bicycle helmet falls in the way of their eyes, but it's just awful. It's absolutely awful. But let me point it out that many other games from many other publishers, many other developers launch without microtransactions. Now, of course, some of them, not only do some of these games, which may have historically had microtransactions and then didn't, some of them will go on to patch them in, which is absolutely true. I believe one of the Call of Duty games launched without microtransactions and then eventually had them added in. I want to say it was Black Ops 4. Can't be 100% sure on that. Gran Turismo Sport was another one. Sony and Polyphony Digital swore that there would never be any type of loot boxes or microtransactions in it, and then of course eventually they patched them in down the line. But that is one other thing. What if, bear with me for a second here, I'm going to go crazy out there, all sorts of madness when it comes to this new big brain idea that I'm gonna put out there. What if many dozens, if not hundreds, of other games release without microtransactions at all, ever in their lifespan, and go on to be successful and sell because they're good games? Does every other company who doesn't put microtransactions in their game, does that automatically mean there's no fate in it? Did The Witcher 3, did they have no faith in that one? Because not only did that have 2 large paid DLCs, but it had no microtransactions, and it had something like 14 free content updates. Did they have, by that logic, there's probably negative faith in that. How does that even work? But this just goes to show that these people at Polygon, they're just some of the worst people out there, and you should not be listening to their opinions in any way, shape, or form. In fact, this will tie into another topic later in this video, but I do want to remind everyone that if you need to question if Polygon in any way, shape, or form should be listened to in any way, shape, or form, I want you to remember 2 things. SimCity and their Doom 2016 review. Check the video out for that one. But next up, we have some Diablo 4 stuff to talk about. This one will also kind of go all over the place. But because it's going to be the year 20XX, because who knows when it's actually going to come out. I mean, hell, they just did it to Damage Control last year and have said that it's not coming out anytime soon. Well, so because it's 20XX and because it's HongKongIncorporated.com, I mean Blizzard, or games in general really in the modern era, it's awful. So yes, it's going to have cosmetic microtransactions. Instead of including them in the game. Now I want to remind you that if you were one of the people unfortunate enough to play Diablo 3 for a long time, like I was, there was a, what do they call it? Was it a wardrobe system? A transmog system? A glamour system? I played Final Fantasy 14, I know glamour. They had a system where you could basically copy the appearance of any piece of gear you had, and you could put that over your one, so you could make yourself look the way you wanted. You could even dye gear to get it the color you wanted. Again, just like Final Fantasy 14. In fact, Final Fantasy 14 is probably the best example of it, because many people say that glamour is the true end game. There's no other reason to play the game. But anyway, back to what we have here. So what is this going to be when it comes to microtransactions in Diablo 4? Is it going to be dyes? Are there going to be classic looks from different Diablo games? Iconic sets of armor, which is all locked behind that? Is it going to be cross-game armor and crossovers? Or are we going to have to buy Mercy's armor for whatever it is, your female sorceress? Are you going to have to buy... Who else do we have? Jim Raynor's gear for your barbarian. You see my point here? What is gonna... Where is this going? Where does this start? And more importantly, where and when does this stop? Now, the worst part of all of this, it's not only bad that they have microtransactions coming into it, even though I will say this, arguably cosmetic microtransactions are the least offensive because they do not alter gameplay or balance in any way, shape, or form. But it's still the point. They're still trying to rip everyone off and rip people off with it and lock content and all behind it, which is basically where this next point comes in. So, like I said, the worst part of all of this is how Blizzard defended it. They specifically said, and I quote, "It will give players a choice not previously available to them." A choice not previously available to them. So they have to pay for it with real world money. Here's a crazy idea for you, Hong Kong Incorporated. Then fucking include it with them to give them that choice. Is that so hard? Is that so big brained? Do they not? Do they have PR people who are paid exorbitant, obscene amounts of money, and this is the best they can come up with in defense of all of this shit? And this is where it gets worse. Remember when I asked, where does it start, where does it stop, and when does it stop? Where are they going to go with this, and where are they going to draw the line? We all know some games have promised only cosmetics and then have went on to add pay-to-win elements to it. But how is this going to stop? Are we going to get to Diablo 5 and every character will look exactly the same? Armor doesn't change in any way, shape, or form, your appearance when you put it on. And every single look is going to be purchasable with real world money. Games companies in general, I mean, they've always tried to push the boundary of what they can do and what they can charge us for. I want to go back a few years. I believe this was in Battlefield 3 era, if not Battlefield 4 era, when EA pushed, or well, they talked about in their board meetings and whatnot as well. They even said this publicly, or released it publicly and whatnot. They theorized, what if you're playing a Battlefield game, you're a couple of levels in and whatnot too, the game affords you with, let's call it 20 clips of bullets when you start, and then you're halfway through the game or whatever it is, you're out of bullets. You know, what's wrong with us asking for $1 for you to reload? Imagine that as a game in future. That's one I don't want to be a part of. Thankfully, I have about 1,000 games upstairs that will always work after this crappy, always online monetization, DRM controlled, constant microtransaction future hits. I'll be ready for it. I have a backup plan. Does everyone else though? Next up, some harrowing news for one of the biggest games of the year out there. So naturally, if you're playing it in a certain combination, if you will, take warning of what we're going to talk about here. And we have Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield, which have unfortunately been wiping some people's SD cards. Now, this seems to only be limited. It's limited to very specific situations. There are people out there, usually Nintendo defenders and apologists, who are saying, oh, well, you shouldn't be playing with a hacked Switch or a fake microSD card. That has been proven false. Obviously, it does happen to some people in those situations, but it's not limited to that kind of stuff. You can have a proper, legit Switch and a proper branded microSD card formatted correctly, and this could still be an issue. Or, well, I say formatted correctly, but you'll see what we mean anyway. But this combination of parameters, if you will, if you have a digital version of Sword or a digital version of Shield, you can potentially wipe your entire microSD card. Now, this will happen. Some people have also theorized that it's linked to autosave, which again has also been proven false. But the potential for this is if the game crashes while you're playing a digital copy on your Switch, it can potentially completely wipe your microSD card. Your save file will be fine because you might remember the Switch does not allow you to put your save files onto a microSD card, and it stores them on the internal system storage only and has no way to save them from there. But that one is okay if this does happen to you. So your save file is there, but you may have to download Pokemon again. You may have to re-download 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 120, 240, whatever it is, gigabytes of games. Or at least possibly in theory. There's no way anyone has that many Switch games. There's nothing to play on the damn system. But anyway, let's go. Physical games are okay in this regard. So I know I'll be fine because I have my physical edition, my physical limited dual edition of Pokemon Sword and Shield coming maybe Monday, maybe Tuesday. Hopefully Monday though. I'm off Monday. And, well, I want to play it sooner rather than later. But Those ones seem to be okay anyway. And like I said, it's not tied to the autosave like some people had theorized. What it has been, we'll call it basically proven to be linked to, is the formatting of your micro SD card. Now, if you've bought a micro SD card bigger than maybe 16 gigabytes in the last probably 8 to 10 years, it's going to be formatted in exFAT, EXFAT, because, well, that's the basic standard that has been for so long at this point. Anything over maybe 16 gigabyte for so long now has been exFAT. It is now the default, de facto standard, especially when you're going to bigger SD card sizes, which of course nowadays micro SD cards and whatnot are so cheap that why wouldn't you buy a bigger one? Hell, I know when was it? It's Saturday now. Just yesterday, my new micro SD card from when I buy a GoPro, probably early next year, that arrived yesterday. And that's a 256 gig micro SD card. It's obviously formatted in exFAT. And I think I paid like €46 for it. So why wouldn't you buy something that big? But my point is, it's the de facto standard. It's the default at this point, which really highlights something. And it's Nintendo's lack of keeping up with the times again. Because as exFAT has been the default for so many years at this point now, FAT32 is only for, not only it's only for small SD cards, but it's also for old stuff. You don't even need to use, granted, if you have anything over a 4 or anything under a 4 gigabyte SD card, micro SD card or whatever, you can get away with FAT32 because of its single file size limitations, that you don't need anything bigger. But anything bigger than 4 gigabytes in the last 8, 9, 10 years, you go with exFAT. That's how this technology and all works. But it's just madness that they would even do this, that they would even set up their situation like that. And after everything that happened with Pokemon, this is even more of a bad situation. I would almost argue that Pokemon Sword and Shield are my new Fallout 76. Every week that goes by, something gets worse. And they just outdo themselves with the worst thing ever. But between all of this, actually I shouldn't say all of this, because this one only applied for post-launch stuff. But with all the negativity and all the removal and the obvious apparent lack of objective quality in the latest releases, Nintendo were doing something that's basically unheard of. Nintendo were offering refunds on pre-orders. Now, you might remember that many companies have slowly adopted some type of refund policy. The Nintendo one is almost absolute and ironclad. And they know that there's so many problems and so much wrong here that they were offering refunds to people who would ask for it a lot of the time. Didn't seem to be blanket, but there was a lot of stuff there. So they really know they messed up somewhere. And all I can say is, how bad is this going to get over the next week, 2 weeks, months, whatever it is, when more and more time goes by, more and more things are found out, more and more patches mess everything up, or, well, Game Freak going to Game Freak in 2019, and woo lad. Now, this next little topic is really, really just more of an addendum or a reiteration or a tidbit or whatever it is of something we talked about earlier. Swing back to 2 of our previous topics in this one. Think back to our Need for Speed one, where I basically slaughtered Polygon for being an absolute joke. And link it back to the one we just talked about with Pokemon, how much of a disaster and how much of an absolute... It just all ties together. It just all ties together. With how none of them can be trusted, they're an absolute joke, and probably paid shills. But I'm just going to read off 2 quick things for you. And then we're just going to leave it at that. It's going to be basically presented without comment, or presented without context. Without comment would probably be better. I'm going to read for you the tweet from GameSpot about their Pokemon Sword and Shield review. Pokemon Sword and Shield scale down the bloated elements of the series while improving what really matters, making for the best new generation in years. Now, that was, as you could tell, I couldn't say that with a straight face. Like, I could read that by myself, but trying to read it out loud in front of a camera, I just couldn't keep a straight face. If you click into this review, which I highly suggest you do not do because you don't want to give them clicks or make them think that anyone values their opinion in any way, shape, or form. They have one negative listed for this game. There is one topic, one bullet point in their the bad section for the review of Pokemon Sword and Shield. The starters' evolutions are among the weakest designs of the bunch. That's it. That's it. But let's move away from deeply depressing, massively underpowered, woefully laughable hardware and experiences, and we'll move on to the future, as we like to do so often here on the channel. And we're going to do that by looking at ray tracing in a way. Now, the reason I say this is primarily up until now, ray tracing, at least in-game real-time ray tracing, has been limited to RTX from the NVIDIA series, the RTX series or ray tracing series, using the Microsoft Windows DXR format or kernel or API, or I don't know the exact one which they use, but yeah, the point is that's the one that they've pretty much been limited to, and you've basically had to use that if you wanted real-time ray tracing in any of your games that support it. Now, obviously, going forward, there will be more hardware-based ray tracing because AMD are working on something like that with Navi, and we'll probably see, or well, we're going to be seeing that in what's probably an extremely basic form in the PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2.4. But what we're also seeing a rise of in the meantime is engine-based ray tracing. Now, what that means is that it's not completely hardware-based and is very specific and almost unique to these pieces of hardware. For example, you have let's call it the only GPU out there worth owning at the moment, the RTX 2080 Ti. And you have that, you've got stuff like the tensor cores and the ray tracing and whatnot incorporated inside it. This one is has specific hardware designed specifically for ray tracing, and it can do pretty much just that, and it can do it well. Now, that of course is limited to the hardware. For example, my GTX 1080 Founders Edition does not have this hardware. While they have enabled ray tracing on high-end 10 series cards, because the hardware for it isn't there, it's very, very underwhelming. Let me give you a quick example. I turned on Quake 2 RTX, turned everything up to max with my Intel i7-5960X. That's a 1,000 something euro CPU at the time when I bought it, and a GTX 1080 Founders Edition. And guess how many frames per second I got? 5. That's right, I got 5 frames per second in Quake 2 while trying to use ray tracing. It just goes to show, if the hardware isn't there for it, you don't do it. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about ray tracing now in a minute when we get to the next topic. Not so much ray tracing, but PC hardware when we get to the next topic. But we'll go back to ray tracing at the moment anyway. So, like I said, we've been seeing an increase in engine-based ray tracing. What this means is that within these engines and these parameters and whatnot, it can be programmed and designed, factored in, any type of hardware. You don't specifically need, obviously it's a massive benefit and bonus if you do have it, but it doesn't specifically need hardware-based ray tracing. Now, let me give an example of this. Crytek, that studio that you might remember out there that are pretty much famous for being nothing more than a benchmark because all their games are frankly awful for gameplay, but they look great. I mean, hell, can you run Crysis? Says it all. But anyway, they have their own ray tracing benchmark. Obviously, Crytek have developed and used the Cry engine. It's a great looking engine that makes awful games, but they have their own ray tracing benchmark that can run. And it's not just limited to RTX GPUs, but it's not only limited to NVIDIA. You can actually use AMD-based GPUs for this as well, because it's all software engine based and not hardware GPU based. So that's pretty much explains how this could work for you right there. Now, they've given some recommendations, if you will, on hardware on what to use this for in order to get decent results. Obviously, better hardware will yield better results, but they recommend having an AMD Ryzen 5 2500X or an Intel Core i7 8700. And GPU-wise, you're looking at an AMD Vega 56 8GB or an NVIDIA GTX 1070 8GB. Of course, 16 gigs of RAM, Windows 10 64-bit, and DirectX 11. Now, the very interesting thing I want to note about this is when you look at NVIDIA's RTX protocols and their form of ray tracing, you need the specific hardware. When you use NVIDIA's, let's call it software-based RTX, like I could do on their select games with my Founders Edition 1080, well, that's above what Crytek are recommending as the benchmark test, which is a 1070. Now, let me remind you real quick, we have a 1070, there's a 1070 Ti, a 1080, and then a 1080 Founders Edition. So there's a couple of gaps in there. Now, granted, the performance difference is big overall between a 1070 and a 1080 Founders Edition, but of course, it gets progressively smaller as you go up. I mean, you've got a 1080 Founders Edition up here, you've got a 1070, you're getting a big gap, you're getting a 1070 Ti, regular 1080, so the difference is minor. But still, the point is that they are recommending something that, using NVIDIA's protocol, is basically unusable in ray tracing. So it's going to be interesting to see what this does. I haven't got around to downloading and trying this yet, mainly because I'm too lazy, because, well, you need to sign up for the CryEngine marketplace, Crytek's own little marketplace and all. Now, it's not a games marketplace or anything like that. It's basically for the CryEngine. This benchmark is free. It's mostly for CryEngine development and whatnot too. Obviously, I don't have an account for that, and I cannot be bothered to do it just to download a benchmark. But the big thing is, what does everyone else see out there? What results are everyone getting with their mixed CPUs, with their non-RTX GTX CPUs? Now, that sounded really weird there. Non-RTX GTX CPUs. Yes, that makes sense. At least it does in my mind. Anyway, but it's going to be interesting to see not only how the CryEngine handles it. Not only is the CryEngine really good looking, remember, but it's also woefully unoptimized. But other engines as well. I believe even the Unreal Engine is working, if not already has a working prototype of some sort of engine-based ray tracing. And of course, all the other ones as well that won't be limited to just hardware-based ray tracing. So let's keep going with the future PC hardware side of it for a second, because we can incorporate ray tracing into what we're going to talk about now as well. And specifically, we're going to talk about the upcoming NVIDIA 3000 series. Of course, this name is tentative at the moment. It could be the NVIDIA 3000 or NVIDIA 3080 Ti, the 3080, the 3070 and whatnot. But it could also be the 2180 Ti, the 2180 and whatever. We have to wait and see. There's basically no news or anything in that regard on it. But there have been one or two rumors out there at the moment, if you will. Now, these rumors pretty much say that it's going to launch in June of 2020, which means I'm building a new computer within the next year. And yeah, that's going to have a nice, probably Intel Core i9 10 series. What's the 10998? 109980. I can't remember what it is, but the XE or whatever it was, the good CPU, the big boy's CPU. So I'll have one of them and maybe a 3080 Ti or something like that. But it's rumored for June. There's no major details, announcements, specs, pretty much anything on it yet, other than one thing, that it's going to be 7nm technology. Now, automatically, some people are losing their mind at this. 7nm technology does not mean, oh my god, true, top of the line, next gen performance, everything, this, that, and the other. No. Let me give you an example, a perfect example, of why that 7nm in and of itself does not automatically guarantee you're in the future. Let's look at AMD's current line of GPUs, the RX 5700 series, the 5700, the 5700 XT, and the Radeon 7, that cancelled GPU that was made in very limited quantities. Well, those are all 7nm technology GPUs. Their best one is still several places behind NVIDIA GPUs, especially their top end. And those NVIDIA GPUs are not 7nm based. So just by automatically swapping to new technology like that, new silicon size, it doesn't automatically mean you're 100% ahead of the competition. It still needs to be done correctly, as AMD illustrate they cannot do with GPUs. CPUs have caught up, but the GPUs not so much. Now, anyway, let's go back to the NVIDIA 3000 series. We'll just call it the 3000 series. Obviously, it could be 21 series. But anyway, what do we expect from it? Now, I want to say we're going to see some big gains here. Now, people will automatically just shit on me for saying, oh, yeah, you just want there to be big gains because you're buying NVIDIA, this, that, and the other, NVIDIA fanboy, blah, blah, blah. No. I think that because of how ray tracing was handled, when ray tracing came in with the RTX 2000 series, I always said one thing. I always said that the first generation of something, arguably possibly even the second generation of something, are proof of concept. That it works and it can be done. So, going forward, the second series, the third series, maybe even the fourth series, will be significant gains when it's all properly refined. And that's when it really comes into play. So, hopefully in the next series, the 3000 series, maybe not, maybe it'll be the 4000 series, maybe we will see high quality ray tracing, the equivalent of having it at max settings or whatever it is, at least max ray tracing settings, will be so performance light, or at least nowhere near as performance heavy, that you will still get maxed out quality settings, high resolution, and very, very high frame rates. At the moment, right now, in the first series, enabling DirectX or enabling ray tracing will cut your frame rate in half, sometimes even lower. But you could be running a game at maybe 120 FPS, and then you turn on ray tracing and you're down to 60, 70, 80 FPS. It's a significant performance hit. But again, proof of concept. Refinement, refinement, refinement. And that's why I think that even though the massive performance gains may not be there in every way, in every game and whatnot, some people will be thinking, oh yeah, I could double my frame rate in this game with a new GPU. No. Maybe you won't get them in the regular performance one. Maybe you'll get another 10% FPS, another 20% FPS, whatever it is. But I think the big one is going to be the efficiency of ray tracing. Now, where does that come into play for me? Well, I may have to... I may have to skip Cyberpunk 2077 for like 2 months. Which will kill me, because I'm really looking forward to that game for a lot of reasons. There's one or two reasons I'm not looking forward to it, but overall I'm pretty damn hyped for it and looking forward to it a lot. But my problem, the way I look at it is this: if they announce that the 3000 series is coming, even if they only make it the announcement before Cyberpunk releases, well, then I'm definitely going to hold off and build a new one. Now, for some reason, I also have a feeling that they're going to just announce it before that and say, yeah, every 3080 Ti comes with free Cyberpunk. And then I'll just Randy Marsh all over the place. But it feels good because the future is ray tracing. It's going to be it's eventually a few years from now, ray tracing will be another standard feature in PC gaming. It will be in every game, every slider, not every slider. It will be an option with different presets that every single game will eventually, within the next maybe 5 years, incorporate. Mainly because, like we said in the previous topic, the increase of engine-based ray tracing, which is hardware agnostic. So it doesn't matter if you have all those beast NVIDIA GPUs, or if you have something shitty, like an NVIDIA GTX 970, the worst GPU ever created. Or you have all of those shitty AMD GPUs. The point is, going forward, they will all be able to do it in some way, shape, or form. And that's why I think it's here to stay. Even if it's not RTX, even if it's just engine-based DirectX, or engine-based ray tracing, or DirectX ray tracing, or whatever it is. I think eventually, within the next few years, it's here to stay as a common feature. And that is one of the reasons why I love PC gaming and hardware. Actually, you know what? It's probably specifically PC hardware. High-end, cutting-edge PC hardware. Because the hardware, it's sick of it. It's sick of sitting at the exact quality. It's trying to create these new ways. It's trying to create hardware that can utilize software to do these new things, new visuals, new effects and all that were not previously possible. And that's what with the future is so bright because of all this ray tracing. I'm going to need shades. That's all it is. So not only do I think it's going to be a commonplace standard feature a few years from now, but what's after that? That's an interesting question. That's the one I'm looking forward to next. What's the next big thing after ray tracing? So moving away from the bleeding cutting edge of technology for a minute and moving back to Xbox One. Well, Xbox and Microsoft had their new what do they call it? X019 or X019 or whatever they call it. I've never understood what name they call it. They've had their new little press conference thingy, whatever it was, their showcase and all that in London, in the UK. Now, they've announced a couple of new things in there too. Some smaller stuff as well, like Game Pass and some of the things coming to it and whatnot too. Not going to talk about all of it, but I do want to talk about some of the more interesting ones, which are primarily, we'll call them other, I can't even call them exclusives, but primarily other software that was never on Xbox, or not on Xbox, at least coming to Xbox. So, specifically, we're looking at Kingdom Hearts. Now, Kingdom Hearts 3 has already been on Xbox One since the start of this year when it launched. Now, the problem with that is there are something like, I believe it's 9 Kingdom Hearts games. I want to say it's 9 Kingdom Hearts games. And none of them had been on Xbox before. So that presented a little bit of a problem for anyone who didn't have a PlayStation and wanted to understand the story of Kingdom Hearts 3 in any way, shape, or form. Without going onto YouTube and just watching that, of course. But Kingdom Hearts, everything Kingdom Hearts, is coming to Xbox. 1.5, 2.5, the whole story so far thing, it's all coming to Xbox. There's no date for it yet. It just believe is 2020 at the moment, but it's a little bit late, isn't it? It's kind of weird. But also, Yakuza is coming to Xbox. Now, it's partial Yakuza, probably down the line full Yakuza. I can't call them PlayStation exclusives, because Yakuza is not a PlayStation exclusive series, because not only are several of the games on PC now, Yakuza 0 is on PC, Kiwami is on PC, Kiwami 2 is on PC, Yakuza 6 is coming to PC, and down the line we know that Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 Remastered will be coming to PC. Of course, I have a feeling that all of these are going to move over to the Xbox as well, but strangely enough, PlayStation fanboys are devastated over this, which is always a little bit of extra salty bit of fun to add to me. But also they've said that Final Fantasy 7 through 15 will be coming to Xbox Game Pass eventually and sequentially. So Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8 Remastered, Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2, Final Fantasy 12 Zodiac Age, obviously not Final Fantasy 11, Final Fantasy 13, 13-2, Lightning Returns 13-3, and Final Fantasy 15 will all be coming to Xbox Game Pass. Now, having said that, you might notice that 2 games were missing from that list. Final Fantasy 11, which is obvious that it's not coming to it. It's only left on PC at the moment after the PS2 servers were shut down and the Xbox 360 servers were shut down. It still exists on the PC. But Final Fantasy 14 is currently only on PS4 and PC. However, it's been announced that Final Fantasy XIV is coming to Xbox One, which is strange to me, almost. But it's coming to Xbox One. Again, you could say better late than never, but it just feels like no one's going to play it on there. It's going to be like a late port machine and whatnot too, but I don't know. I guess you could always say that it's a current MMO. It's better that it's on the current platforms and whatnot too, but we'll see how it goes. I know I guess I can't say play it. I still sub to it. I do play it every so often, I guess. By every so often, I mean once every few weeks, or, well, since the new patch dropped, I maybe log in once a week to do the Nier raid and get my weekly reward. But Anyway, what else do we see from XO19? Well, we've seen a bit of Age of Empires 4. It's pre-alpha footage. I don't know how I feel about it yet. Some of it looks good, but something strikes me as just a little bit off when it comes to the art style and the art direction. Microsoft looked like they've been going big with the whole Sea of Thieves kind of look, and I see Age of Empires 4, and I see that in it. I see that look in it. I don't know if it is. Something just strikes me about it. When I saw it, that was the first thing that popped into my mind. And think, what's it, Warcraft 3 Reforged? It's got that look. Something about it has that look. I could be wrong, but I think that when I see it straight away. Now, this next part, this next announcement, I feel personally offended by it. Remedy are working on some strange port or link or whatever it is to some, I don't even know what to call it, joke of a supposedly 10-year-old existing CSGO clone. And they're announcing it like it's the next big Fortnite. Rip Remedy. Rest in pain. P-A-Y-N-E. Remedy. This kills me so bad, because Remedy used to be such a great studio. Then they made stuff like Control and Quantum Break. But Remedy made some of the best third-person shooter games of all time. Arguably, possibly, two of the best third-person shooter games of all time. Max Payne 1 and 2. Some of the best third-person shooter games I've ever played. Even story-wise, they're fantastic. So much about them is just brilliant. There's the tongue-in-cheek jokes in there too. Some people have beef with the writing. I love the whole noir stories and how they play out and whatnot too, as well as some of the references and the way they cross everything over in it. I love those games. Not to mention the gameplay is solid, and Max Payne 1 was revolutionary at the time. It was incredible and insane, both games. And unfortunately, Remedy feel like a shadow of their former selves. And I don't say that in a good way, in one of the great Alan Wake shadow kind of ways. But no, it's the bad one. It's the bad way. And it gets even worse as well. We all know Microsoft bought Obsidian throughout the development of The Outer Worlds. Now, many people, myself included, have been very vocal about our worry for Obsidian, as Microsoft have, we call it almost a tradition at this point, of running studios into the ground. Look at Rare when Microsoft bought them. They're now a joke. You have, what's the other one as well? Lionhead, I believe it was. They're now gone. So, yeah, Microsoft, they don't have the best track record of keeping studios open and going and in line with their proper sheen and their proper esteem. And now it looks like Obsidian is following suit. And I'm not saying this just because Microsoft bought them, but no. It's because of the next game that Obsidian are releasing. Their first game, fully developed and funded and all, under Microsoft. It's called Grounded. It's basically what I can only call a Bug's Life, Ants style survival game. It looks very kiddie, in the same art style you would expect of Sea of Thieves, which is what Microsoft goes for nowadays, because it's probably all the Xbox One can actually run. And yeah, it feels bad. I really hope Obsidian aren't screwed. I want to see an Outer Worlds 2 or something along those lines, because Outer Worlds was great. But at this point, I'm not hopeful anymore. If it happens, if it does come out good and other stuff and games and whatnot come out good and well, that's going to be a great surprise. But at this point, I am expecting everything just to nosedive right into the ground. But I will say we can clear up this little segment and end this little segment with a positive note. Some proper hype, some proper happiness, some proper everything. And that is, after months and months and months, I believe it was March, maybe April, but I believe it was March of this year, when Microsoft announced that Halo the Master Chief Collection would not only be coming to PC, but it would feature Halo Reach on both Xbox One and on PC, and would be the first game to launch in the PC Master Chief Collection, because they're going to go chronologically when it comes to the story. Halo Reach will launch on Steam, Windows 10 Store, and Xbox One as part of the Master Chief Collection on December 3rd. That's about 3 weeks away from now, and I cannot wait. I'm going to be so hyped, so happy. It's going to be crazy. I haven't played Halo Reach in so long. It's my second favorite Halo game, and I can't wait. And to be able to play it at a proper frame rate, at a proper resolution, with proper PC quality features, and importantly, mouse and keyboard for a first-person shooter, it's going to be crazy. If you haven't played Halo Reach in the longest time, be it on Xbox One, Xbox One X, backwards compatibility, or Xbox 360, you might remember that that game ran very, very poorly. It pretty much hovered in the low 20s FPS at all times. It was very, very rough. Very, very difficult to play in that way. But now we're going to have our silky smooth 120 frames per second. I can't wait. I've already thrown down my money for that. Now you might be thinking, Q, but what about that time you said no pre-orders. I still stand by that. There is a difference. Someone's going to be shitting on me for that. But the difference is that Halo Reach has had multiple different beta tests proving the quality and the standard has been increasing and again and again and again. And it is already in a worthy state of buying. I could be eating these words in a few weeks, but based on everything, the evidence shown to us and what we know, it's good, it's promising, it's safe. Unlike Red Dead Redemption 2, which had nothing pre-launch and is pretty much a bit of a disaster. Yikes. Now, I want to throw in a different little bit of a segment here right at the end to kind of explain some stuff, because not everyone might understand this, and I do get this a lot, and I see it a lot around, even if it's not directly addressed to me in sometimes, but I just want to talk a bit about it because some people don't understand this, and that is, what is console level optimization? Now, console level optimization, when you look at the hardware in modern consoles like the PS4, the Xbox One, I'm not going to say the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. I want to use the base hardware as the better comparison. So, when you look at the hardware in these consoles launched in 2013, the hardware in them was kind of mid to low end 2012, late 2011 hardware. So it's very, very underpowered by modern standards. It's frankly completely laughably out of date, especially that AMD Jaguar CPU. But I digress. Let's get back to the topic on hand. So that type of hardware, the results you can get from that low end age-old hardware at this point, should be extremely low and extremely laughable and very, very low quality. Now, to an extent it is. I don't mean that just to take a dump on it all, but when you look at most console games, they're the equivalent of the low settings on PC, or maybe if you're lucky you might get medium. And of course on PC we have high, very high, and ultra, sometimes even higher like godlike or nightmare. But you see my point, they're still very, very low quality settings. However, the visuals that they can still get from this age-old hardware is pretty impressive to an extent. I don't want to say impressive. It's more so, it's not impressive visuals. It's impressive that they can get even those low quality visuals from such age-old weak hardware. And this is down to console level optimization. Now, like I said, you look at PC hardware. The equivalent PC graphics card of the base consoles for this generation is a GTX 660. That's a mid to low end entry level card from about 2012. You try run a GTX 660 in a modern game, you're going to have a bad time. You're going to get maybe 1080p, everything on low, and you probably might, if you're lucky, squeeze by with 30 frames per second, which is a big no-no and something we don't do here on PC. But thanks to console level optimization, you can squeeze out a lot more visually from these. A perfect example is look at some of the first party Sony games. Death Stranding looks really good, and it is on this hardware as well. The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima. You can see why a lot of these visually impressive games are almost mind-boggling how they can run on such low-end, outdated hardware. And this, again, is down to console-level optimization. So, this is one of, believe it or not, you're going to hear me say something that probably is controversial and many people never thought I'd say, but one of the benefits of having consoles is console-level optimization. With one fixed piece of hardware, in the case of, let's say, the PS4, you've got 102 million pieces of that same hardware out there, you can target as much efficiency out of that hardware as possible. There's very, very, very little overhead, very little wasted CPU power, very little wasted GPU power, very little wasted anything power, because they know how every single one of these 102 million boxes is going to run, and they can factor in and work around that. By comparison, if you run, let's say, the GTX 660, the equivalent, remember, if you run that on a PC, there's significantly higher overhead because there are billions of different configurations that could be running off hardware, as well as innumerable amounts of software and just general PC setup situations that could be running at all. So there's much, much higher overhead on PCs. So you might not be able to get the same visuals out of a 660 that you get out of the consoles, despite them being roughly the same kind of hardware and the same kind of performance in GPU almost. So thanks to console level optimization, with the lack of overhead, let's just use random numbers here for an example. On the consoles, you might get 99% of efficiency from their hardware, whereas the equivalent on PC, you might only get 80% efficiency because of all of the other stuff. Not to mention as well that when people are coding games and whatnot for PC, the longer you spend on one specific GPU or one specific piece of hardware, a CPU for optimizing and whatnot too, the longer it takes, the more man hours, the more money it all takes and all too, and not to mention how many people are going to use that exact setup and how much of a benefit and bonus are you going to get from it. You might get 10,000 people, if even. That would probably even be a high number for some low-end hardware. Versus you spend all that time getting all those intricacies, all that detail, you spend all the time with all that optimization for a console. You know The Last of Us Part 2 is going to reach, in potential, 102 million people. And all those 102 million people are going to see that benefit. So that's what console level optimization basically is. Because of all the hardware going to be exactly the same, it's just in any console really. They can go and they can fine tune it as much detail as possible to eke out as much little extra drips of performance. God knows the consoles need it, but they can get the performance, the visuals, whatever. Everything can be 100% tailored to that hardware, how it runs, and the engines can even be built around it, which is kind of what Nintendo do when you look at a lot of their hardware. The Switch, for example, with Mario Odyssey, the engine is built around the hardware, and it's probably one of the best looking, and definitely one of the best running games on the platform. So you can see why that's important, and one of the benefits to it as well. So that will explain a lot, I think, when it comes to why consoles can do what they do, even if it isn't really that impressive, but it's more impressive based on what's in them, if you understand that, if you will. So that makes a little bit of sense, and hopefully it's cleared it up a little bit anyway. Granted, I can kind of talk in circles sometimes, but anyway, we are on to the final quintessential segment. The one that everyone loves, everyone's best, everyone's favorite, the most important segment of the entire show. And boy, have I missed doing this one, because, well, I didn't get a chance to do it last week, but I am getting a chance to do it this week. And that is, Q, what is up? What is the deal? What is good? What is going on? What are you playing? Well, I'm in a bit of a weird situation, because right now, I finished Luigi's Mansion 3. I got 100% collection on it, 100% completion. I say 100% completion because I finished the game, I went back, I got all the gems, I got all the booze. That's what I consider the collectible side of it too. You can earn the extra achievements too, but they don't do anything, so I didn't bother with those. But finished the game, 100% booze, 100% gems on every floor. So I feel like I'm doing that one justice. It was a fun game. It was definitely enjoyable, despite a couple of little control issues. But other than that, I've been playing very, very little of Gears 5 Online. The game is basically dead. I've had significant problems trying to find matches the last few days, which worries me greatly. I mean, here we are. The game launched in September. Here we are 2.5 months later, and the game is almost dead. That's worrying. That is very, very worrying. But I find very, very little to play in that anyway. I'm just kind of maybe burnt out on it, might be the proper way. But I did finally start Yakuza Kiwami 2. It looks fantastic. The Dragon engine, the Yakuza Kiwami 2 and Yakuza 6 engine, it looks fantastic. It's crazy. It looks so good. Some of the scenes and cutscenes and just smaller scale scenes at the start of the game, I thought they looked brilliant maxed out. And then I got to Kamurocho itself and holy, mind blown. It looks amazing. It's proper next gen stuff. I can't wait to see what Yakuza Kiwami or Yakuza 6, as well as whatever uses it properly in the future on next gen and going forward as PC games, what that uses. Because that is going to be some top tier high level stuff. Mark my words. I have a feeling a few years from now, when it comes to when the PS5 and the Xbox 2.4 and PC games and PC hardware and whatnot, a few years from now when that's all the de facto, mark my words, you will hear me say stuff like Yakuza will be one of the next, Yakuza 8 will be one of the best looking games I've ever seen. If it uses the same engine or even better, mark my words, it's going to be up there. It's going to be fantastic. However, I do have to stop playing Yakuza Kiwami 2. While I do run the game maxed out, I drop to 57 frames per second sometimes. That's right. My age-old piece of crap hardware drops below 60 FPS. And coming from Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami at a rock solid, unwavering, unfaltering 120 frames per second, I can't do it. I have to wait for, who knows, maybe June, maybe beforehand, before I can play Yakuza Kiwami 2 properly and do it justice. And that kills me, because I can't wait to do it. It's going to be such an amazing time, but it's going to be a killer waiting for it in the meantime. But other than that, I did get a little bit of a Capcom Home Arcade. That came earlier this week. Streamed that. Played many of the games, if not all on it. And then every so often, I sat down. I maybe played through Final Fight or played through AVP in my own time or whatever it was. And, well, I mean, it's fun. It's fun, but it's a bit of a weird one. When you look at the size of it, the cost of it, hell, the even aesthetic design of it too. But it's certainly a weird one. But that's where the big one comes in. Because right now, it is the 16th, Saturday the 16th of November. Just yesterday, officially, Pokemon Sword and Shield released. Now, my copies aren't here yet. They're scheduled to be here on maybe Monday or Tuesday. I'm off Monday. I'm hoping it arrives Monday. I can get into it earlier and spend more time on it. However, with Pokemon, in its current form, it's a double-edged sword. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Because there's so much negative stuff about it. And I said this in my video earlier on in the week as well, talking about Pokemon. And while there is so much negativity, so many negative features, so much lower quality and whatnot too, I still think I'm going to enjoy it to an extent. I still think I'm going to enjoy the base core mainline Pokemon RPG aspect of it, while I think the rest of it will just kind of lose its sheen very quickly afterwards, or might kind of distract me on the way through. I still think overall it will still be a decent game, but only in the minimalist side of it and the minimalist way. I don't know how it will go. I'm going to be playing Pokemon Shield. A friend of mine just bought Pokemon Sword and he's been playing that one, so of course we can trade stuff across. But also, strangely enough, today in Pokemon Go, they had a raid hour with Galar Weezing, which was strange considering that we're on Gen 5 and we have Meltan and Galar wheezing. It's kind of bizarre. But other than that, there is another kind of interesting one coming up as well. My old Borderlands 2 crew, who eventually became my Overcooked 2 crew, and then for like one gameplay session, my Left 4 Dead 2 crew, we're moving on, at least the plan is anyway, to Stardew Valley. That's right, Stardew Valley. And there's going to be a big content patch for it later this month on the 26th. So hopefully we're going to be starting possibly on the night of the 26th, give or take 1 or 2 days, because schedules and whatnot too. But Halo Reach is also on December 3rd, which is a few days later. I may or may not buckle and finally play Borderlands 3 with a mixture of, I can't believe I'm going to say this, a mixture of high and ultra settings in order to keep 60 FPS. I feel dirty just even saying that. I had a shower before this, but I think I need another one. And also, I have to stream Life is Strange 2, Episode 5, the finale. I finally want to get over and done with. It's going to release on December 5th, and it will be out of the way forever. At long last, I can't wait till it's done. Life is Strange 2 has just kind of disappointed me on every turn. Most of the episodes are enjoyable as you play them, but with the huge gaps and the protracted just delay, if you will, between all of them, it really kills the mood, kills the flow of the game, and just kills the character, the investment, everything about it. So at this point, I'm just looking forward to playing it and getting over and done with, and finally be finished with it. Oh, and also I'm finally going to get around to continuing or starting something I meant to do months ago, but I got this. Batman Rebirth. I have what I believe is the entire thing so far. I've got 4 deluxe hard copy versions, and well, I hear it's one of the better stories, and even if it is one of the longer ones, mostly when you think of one of the better stories and better arcs and whatnot, you can usually condense it into one of these, one hardback, one deluxe edition, one whatever it is. But this one is 4 because it's like 13 volumes or something like that. Each one has 3 or 4 volumes in it. But apparently it's one of the better ones. I bought it months ago along with Batman White Knight, and I'm finally going to get around to it. So, I mean, you can see it's still even sealed. So, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't read something. Last thing I read was Batman White Knight. And before that, the last thing I read was the end of the Walking Dead comic. And before that, I mean, Fables. I think it was like late last year or something like that. I can't remember when it was I finished that. But yeah, that's it. But anyway, that's it for the end of episode 32 of our lovely little Quack Experimental Podcast. As always, I want to thank everyone for joining me, sticking your way all through this long, lovely, luscious, ludicrous ramblings that I do. And we are all the way here now. As always, let me know in the comments section below if you have any thoughts, opinions, feelings, whatever it is on anything we talk about in this one today, as well as anything that piques your interest. Feel free to throw it on in the comments section below or slide into them DMs on Twitter. They are open for many reasons, one of which, of course, is all of those. Anyway, in the meantime, feel free to hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video, and while you're at it, why not head on over and hit the subscribe button and even ring that little notification bell. As always, I want to thank everyone so much for watching. I will see you on the rest of the videos in my channel. And remember that winners don't play switchboards.